Should we do a quick intro first?
Let's go, Claire.
All right, so hi everyone, I'm Claire. I'm a software engineer at Speckle. I'm working mostly on the C#.NET connectors like Rhino, AutoCAD, Civil, and Revit. Been with Speckle for about almost 3 years now, based in London. So welcome.
Hi, I'm Katerina. I am mainly working on the GIS side development of QGIS and ArcGIS and Python-related developments. So I'll be supporting the Python Automate side today.
And I'm Gergu. I'm also a software engineer here at Speckle. I'm mostly focused on backend and server-related tasks. I'm not very versed in desktop applications, right, like Revit or GIS, but whatever happens in the background, that's my cup of tea. And yeah, I've been with Speckle for a bit more than 2 years now, and I'm based in Budapest, Hungary. Also used to be an architect by trade. Now I don't miss that as much.
All right, cool. So we prepared a little presentation first before we begin the workshop segment, just to give a little bit of context and background to the code that we'll be looking at today. Let me just start sharing. Here we go. So today we'll be talking about continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines for AEC, and also giving you guys a sneak peek of our new Speckle Automates feature. And in this workshop, we'll first do a quick introduction to what we mean by CI/CD for AEC and give you guys an overview of all the different parts of Speckle Automate before going into a quick live demo. And the workshop will be where we'll be recreating some certain parts of the demo. So currently, the industry really struggles from certain data challenges for effective delivery. Generally, these fall into 3 categories that we're going to take a look at in terms of how automated workflows can have an impact. The first is integration. So being able to integrate massive amounts of data that is generated from different disciplines across different softwares throughout the project lifecycle. This is currently a highly manual task. Data quality and compliance as well is a huge challenge. So making sure that your model data is accurate, up to date, and in compliance with relevant industry standards and regulations is quite challenging, as well as resolving any kind of conflicts between your model objects, both internally within your team and across different disciplines. And then finally, the third category, governance. It's currently also quite difficult to manage security and privacy concerns when you're sharing data between different stakeholders. And this can also include things like making sure that you're not exposing any information that you don't want to expose when sending data across channels, and also doing a bit of forensic work when looking at data authorship, and that may be relevant when investigating issues that go wrong in your delivery further on. So the software industry actually has dealt with these problems and have effectively created an automated system, a pipeline for continuous integration and continuous delivery. And I think we can start looking towards the software industry for inspiration and how we can address the highly manual and time-consuming processes in delivery in AEC, resulting in ultimately what we hope for are faster iterations, smaller but more frequent deliverable transmittals, and generally a better quality of data. So I guess Gary can give some context in terms of what continuous integration means in software.
Okay, so I hope this will make sense for you. We draw this parallel with the software industry because this revolution happened roughly 20 years ago there, where previously it was a very highly manual and process-oriented task to deliver new versions of a given software into live environments, and then the whole revolution around DevOps and continuous integration and continuous delivery started, where they said, let's automate as much as possible and as much as they can. So they wrote specific softwares that were doing specific things, and they came up with this concept of pipelines that have two purposes: continuous integration, which is responsible for running checks and build processes on the current state of your project, and continuous delivery, which is responsible for producing deliverables and placing them in the right environments, execution environments, or package delivery environments, right? So if we squint enough, we think there's a great parallel that we can draw examples from and take them into our industry. And I hand it back to Claire to explain how.
A lot of these innovations in software is generally migrated understanding of software as a product to as a service. Like now software is deployed much more frequently than it had been in the past because of a lot of these innovations, and sort of the parallel that we're looking at with AEC for continuous integration, what that would look like is successful integration, meaning that new changes to your project data would be automatically validated and merged into your shared model repository or shared projects. Any conflicts that may result in those merges are quickly identified. And also communicated to whoever authored those changes. Likewise, continuous delivery in AEC would mean automatically generating deliverables when there are changes that are merged into any of the pipelines that feed delivery creation or data transmittal across disciplines and teams. So this could look like receiving a new deliverable from a collaborator, or internal changes to any of the pipelines in your project that result in creation of a deliverable. So now I'll pass it on to Gerga to introduce Speckle Automate and give a little bit more context on all the different pieces that we'll be looking at and working with today.
Okay, thank you, Claire. So Speckle Automate, before we dive in, I'm assuming that most of you are friendly and familiar with Speckle. So you've at least know what Speckle is. If not, please raise your hand and we can do a quick refresher. If yes, okay, a few hands raised. Should we do a quick recap, Claire, on what Speckle is?
Yeah, I could give a
take
general summary. Yeah, so Speckle is, you can think of it as a platform for your 3D models. We don't support model authorship, so we're not trying to allow you to model natively on our platform, but what you do is extract your 3D models from across a variety of our connectors, our integrations with existing software like Rhino, Revit. We have software that's in like a game engine software like Unity, Unreal connections there. We have connections to like Excel and Power BI as well, like quite a large variety. I think we have like 26 plus integrations now. So we support extracting information from there, essentially transforming it into its Speckle equivalent, storing that on our server, and from there allowing our users to be able to extract that information at any time into any of the other integrations that we support, or being able to interact with their model directly on the web in our server. So that's a little bit of context. Everything, we're open source. All of our code is available for you to view on GitHub. And today, I think the context is that Automate is our first product, our first closed source product, but Gary will give you more context in that we're not doing anything that you can't already do with the existing infrastructure, but we're just packaging it nicely into easy to use parts for you guys.
That was a good intro. Thanks, Claire. So what we're going to be focusing on today is we are not going to focus on the desktop connectors experience. In Automate's focus is mostly the data that gets sent into the Speckle server and how you work with that data in different kind of execution environments. So in that sense, Automate is an execution environment for functions in Automate that we give a platform that you can run these functions on. This product is only here to provide that execution environment, right? And it's an addition to the Speckle open ecosystem. It doesn't hold or contain any sort of data. What it does is it simplifies how you can run and register different kind of workloads that operate on your Speckle native data sources, right? And there are three major components that build up the Automate as it is currently a product. A few warnings before we start, and we'll repeat these warnings a bit, is we haven't launched this product yet. So you guys are practically the first external eyes who ever get to touch it. So this is heavily in an alpha stage, and fair warnings that there might be some dragons here and there, but we'll try to work around those during today's workshop. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at what builds up the Automate experience. And for us to understand that, first, we want to do a bit of a recap, because Automate is not the only thing that launches soon on Speckle. We have a few changes on how data is organized in Speckle. If some of you are already familiar with the Speckle concepts, we do have a bit of renaming going on in the Speckle ecosystems, where projects are now the main source of data inside Speckle, which can contain multiple models, and each model may contain any number of versions. If this sounds familiar, the reason is that it's familiar, that it's because practically this is a rename of our previous streams, branches, commits concept. So if that's something that you are aware of, this is practically a straight rebranding, repositioning exercise that brings these terms up, in our view, a bit closer to the AEC industry, right? So that's what we are trying to achieve here with this. The reason why I wanted to do this quick recap, because I tend to nowadays use the new terminology a lot more, and if we didn't do this recap, I would be confusing you a lot. So let's start with what the part of Speckle Automate are. The first integral building block of Automate are functions. We call the functions that run a certain predefined set of operations on top of Speckle data. So they get the project data and they execute a predefined set of logical operations on them. Function authors can provide whatever custom logic they want, and they have the power through Automate to publish their functions to what we call the Speckle Automate marketplace. Once we have functions, we need to give them context through a model. So if you land on Automate, you can reuse the ready-made functions, or you can create your own. But either way, you can use functions to bind an automation into a Speckle model. This gives it access to the given project model, and it can run on the given execution context. The third wheel of this picture is a library of functions or marketplace, which still continues the Speckle open ethos, where we have a fully open marketplace that allows everyone to share their code, may it be internally inside the company or publicly across Automate. It enables to very easy code/logic reuse that ensures consistency and correct behavior with very easy access to anyone who has access to Automate.
And to give a little
So,
bit of context around who we expect to use Speckle Automate, it's our developers that are familiar with their Speckle data and our SDKs that will author these functions to perform specific operations on their models. And once the function is published, it's really the automation, what we call like automation composers or choreographers that can then decide how to apply those functions to which projects, and not need to have any kind of technical knowledge or know exactly what code is inside the function itself. So these are functionally separated into two different types of usages and user groups.
good point. Yes. So with the automation authoring experience, we are targeting mostly BIM managers who have very intimate knowledge of how their project data is structured, and they can, with an easy user interface, bind specific functions into an automated workflow. And here we are showing what we imagine an automated workflow can be. Automate enables all of these workflows. So may it be a automatic embedded carbon calculator that runs on every new version of your model, to internal code quality checks and compliance checks, to enable external collaborator communications, for example, like with your MEP designers. Or Automate can also provide and generate PDF reports or spreadsheets or any sort of deliverables that you want to automatically generate on your project model whenever a new change lands, right? So Automate tries to be very flexible in what it enables. So it has quite a few different type of outputs that is possible, outcomes that are possible to be generated by functions.
Hey, let's go into the live demo.
Okay.
I think for people who aren't familiar with Speckle, this will give you more context to what we've been talking about in terms of projects and models. So actually, maybe Gerga, if you do a quick run through of the new front end and just give like a quick intro to that, that'd be helpful.
I'll do that, and once we're done with the demo, I think that's when we're gonna stop for our first Q&A session. So if you have questions, we have dedicated time for that. But I think most of what we said so far will click for you once we are done with the demo. And let's hope for the demo gods to be with us today. Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, you should see my screen, which shows the Speckle front end. So those of you who are familiar with our old front end, this is a complete facelift that includes the rename. I think one of you, I'm sorry, I didn't remember who was already registered to latest, but then this might not be good full news for you. But let's do a quick recap, right? So this is your landing page. When you register for latest, you will see something similar, because we will provide you a sample project that has a very basic example design. We are going to use this design in today's workshop too. But practically in your landing page, you will see a list of projects that are the top level collection groups of your Speckle data. And if I go in and explore our sample project, you will see that there are multiple models already in this project, more for their each specific use case, right? In here, well, now that we have project data inside Speckle, we can go and open our Automate landing page.
And maybe
which
Gary could
is,
do a quick, if you just navigate into one of the versions so they can see the viewer as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. That's a very, very important part, right? So once you're in the model page, you can select specific models, and this will open up our 3D viewer experience. Once you open a specific model, what you'll open is the latest version of the given model. You'll get a 3D viewer that you can use to explore your model. It also has a data explorer that shows you properties on the top right of the given element, right? So that you can use our 3D viewer to walk around and interact with your Speckle data. And you can also go in and add or curate multiple model coordination view from different models of your project, right? So here I put in the second model, and now we have a composite view that shows you the current state of our design.
And yeah, also for those new to Speckle, this geometry that you're seeing, this model was uploaded from Rhino, and it extracts not only the geometry, but other relevant attributes and properties on your objects as well, which you can explore in more depth. So if you have things like user strings in Rhino or parameters in Revit, that information will be attached to the geometry itself. And then once you have this model information in your Speckle server, you can then pull it into whichever other connectors we support in the closest approximate native form. So pulling a Rhino model into Revit, most likely you'll get direct shapes with meshes. If you sent it from Revit with like BIM elements, and you can pull it into another Revit model as those native elements, and yeah, to varying degrees of fidelity. But yeah, please continue, Gerga, with the Automate.
Okay, thank you. So next up, we are here to see automations run. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over to automate.speckle.dev, which is our current development environment that you also get access to because you have access to our latest server. So our demo goes like this. Once you land on Automate, you'll immediately see the function marketplace experience, right? Here we have pre-published a few functions that have specific functionalities. I'm gonna use my Automate uses your Speckle account to log in. So it goes and talks to the Speckle server and authenticates with that. So no extra checks and registrations are needed. And immediately you see that I'm logged in. I have already a registered automation, but I'm gonna guide you through on creating a new one in this initial demo. So the way that you would go about creating an automation is via exploring the available functions. And I just so happen to know that there is a function that is named Deerstat. This is a specific function that is authored to provide model health checks on the geometries of the model. This will take a look at how dense our meshes are in terms of vertex count, and it will produce a visual and numerical reports based on the current version of the model, right? So this function was published by our very own Jonathan, and you can see that here's the source code of the function. This will link you to GitHub, and it also provides a description and additional README on the function does. So I'm gonna use this to create a new automation, and in order to create a new automation, again, an automation binds a function to a specific Speckle project. So now we're going to start binding this into a project. I'm selecting our sample project, and I want to run this every time the base design has a new version. So I'm selecting the base design model in here. Once we go to the next slide, we name our automation. And next up, what we get presented with is a form. This form comes from the function author who published this function. They said that, okay, if you want to run this function on your model, I'm going to need a few input variables from you. So please give me some boundaries in which the function can run in. So this function asks for a density threshold, that will be the limit of acceptable mesh density per square meter. And if I'm not mistaken, it should be something around this. And we can also provide a percentage of which is acceptable for higher density objects than the given limit, and we will still pass the check. So I'm going to allow for 10% deviance from that threshold, right? What's important for us is that these parameters get bound into the automation, but it's the function authors who provide this schema, and they do that so that we can supply additional context into their logic. So with all that done, I clicked finish, and now we have a new automation registered. With that click, I've registered that automation in Automate and also on our Speckle server. So the connection between the two environments is made. And we get landed on this page, which is the automation page. In here, you can see that we have this automation. It's currently enabled. And there's some basic data around what project model this operates in. So if I click on the base design, I should be landed back in the 3D viewer, which shows the current status of the model, right? So we can see that we indeed made the right connection. It also shows, hey, this is the function that we bound into this automation, and it hasn't had any runs. If we were to push a new version into this model, it will automatically trigger a new run. But also on Automate, there's a trigger automation button, which I'm going to use for convenience sake for now to trigger a run of this automation. This will take a minute or so to complete. So if in the meantime you have questions, do let me know. If not, I can talk what's happening in the background.
The logs may be available, even though the status isn't updated yet. Okay,
is it? Oh, it is, yes. So we already get a log produced from the function itself, which will show me the internal output of the function execution of the given run. And I think this is getting close to finishing. It says the automation run failed in 17 seconds, which means that our check has not passed because there are too many high density objects there. Okay, and once this is done, I can click on the view version button, which will drop me back into the Speckle server. And if I go into the project page, you'll see this red donut up here, which says, hey, we have 3 failed runs registered as automation statuses for this model. If I click on this, this will show me all of the automation runs that are relevant for this model. And up top, we will see here that this is the actual run. So the AECtech demo automation just ran. It produced a failed result. So we get a non-pass marker for our data integrity. And this function also produced a PDF report that I can click and download that will give me insights into, hey, what's the reason why this model quality check failed, right? This says that, hey, you failed because you said that the pass rate of high density objects is 10%. I was over by that by quite a bit of margin, and I'll get a breakdown of what does my model health look like. So this is an example what an automation can produce. This is a sample deliverable that is admittedly not a very real-world use case specific one, but it's a good example that how a quick automation can produce something that you can immediately communicate your design status with to other people known in the project. Also, what this automation created is it created a new model for me in the project. This is called density, and this will be a new view authored by the function that gives me a visual breakdown of, hey, what does the mesh density look like, and why did this function fail? And in this model of the project, we have a visual color-based gradient that the darker purple it is, the more vertices a mesh has. So this also gives me an insight into why the given automation produced the failure that we saw. So this was the first demo of how it looks like to author an automation and how data flows from an automation into the Speckle server and vice versa. So I'm gonna stop screen sharing now. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the first place where we stop for a quick Q&A.
Thank you so much, guys. It's so excited to see the new features of Speckles, and I'm super excited to use all this, the automate and codes. I have a few questions. In terms of the function authors, they can basically, I'm assuming some of the functions not going to work if the models come from Revit or somewhere else, right? How is that, the documentation will be done by the author is saying, okay, this only works, that function is only work if you have a BREP, but if you have other, the analytical models that will be important somewhere else is not going to work. So how is the checks or that will be work? That was just came out.
It's a very good question, Yasin. Thanks for that. It's a bit of a spoiler because in the next part of the workshop, we're going to show you how we try to go about tackling that problem. The gist is the function authors can specify supported host applications, and based on where the data is coming from, which source application, we can filter is this function capable of executing on that data. So it's the function author's responsibility to ensure correct behavior on the supported applications. Afterwards, it should work, right? And we provide a mechanism for filtering on that.
Sounds good.
Okay, good morning here. I have a few questions, but maybe I'll start with a group about the data and how it's used and stored in Speckle. So basically, from what I see, we export from different software into Speckle, and where is that data being stored? Like as a starting point, is basically the whole model processed in a certain way, uploaded to Speckle servers, and then we start working from it there. Is that the workflow, the starting point?
Yeah, I can tackle that if you'd like. So the way we extract information is on an object level. So we're not working with uploading, and I mean, you can upload files through our front end now, certain types, but generally speaking, when you're working with our interface, with our plugins in our connectors, like for instance, the Rhino connector or the Revit connector, you'll have the ability to have different ways of choosing which objects you want to send to Speckle. And what happens behind the scenes when you make your selection, so say you want to send, you use a filter in Revit by category, you want to send all your walls in your model, or you use a layer filter in Rhino and you want to send every object on a certain layer. What happens is that we have a set of converters, which you won't be working with today, but in the background, what we'll do is convert that native object via the software's API into its Speckle equivalent. That Speckle object is serialized into a JSON string, and then that is what's passed to our and stored in our server. There's lots of fancy tricks to optimize that process and to version each object as it's serialized and stored behind the scenes. But once it's stored in our server, that object will be there indefinitely.
Okay.
And you should be able to access that version, that serialized object at any point.
And what about like non-geometry data? Like, for example, I work for a structural engineering firm. Like the software might be ETABS or RAM, and sometimes it's just loads or a grid or levels. And some of them are purely geometric objects. Some of them aren't. Like, is everything can we upload everything there and start working with it, or is there any sort of restriction?
Yeah, so currently with we have something called an objects kit, which is, if you can think of it as our schema for all the different types of objects that we support. Some of them are geometry, some of them are BIM elements, depending on, so we do have Tekla, ETABS, SAP connectors, but depending on the connector and what stage they are in development, there are varying degrees of object support. So you may find that certain elements are supported well with native conversions, and then others are not currently supported in your connector. They don't have to be explicitly geometry objects. We have things like views that you could send between Rhino and Rhino and Revit. I think and analysis results from our structural connectors as well. So it really depends on what the level of support is for that specific connector, and it can vary widely. So we have certain connectors like our Grasshopper and Revit connector that are very stable. Revit, Rhino, and Grasshopper are very stable, and the support is pretty wide-ranging. We're actually doing a lot of rework on our structural connectors right now. So hopefully, more elements will be supported soon. And then we have some connectors that are very much in alpha. So like maybe in a send-only mode where you can extract certain types of elements, but you can't receive anything in that connector. So it does vary a lot in terms of what's supported.
Okay, but in a sense, the goal is to be able to extract like all of the data from any source and then work with it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think our general position is that we're not necessarily, while there are no files involved in how we send and receive our objects, we're not necessarily trying to replace files. It's not the sort of platform where we would see people regularly storing their entire model because it's a very, like what I call like fuzzy interoperability. Because of the varying degrees of support, it's not guaranteed, and across disciplines as well. So a beam in Revit may not be exactly functional as a beam in Tekla. You can get a good approximation of it, but it's not going to be one-to-one. So what we're trying to do is really loosen up those connections between softwares that currently are very difficult to do. Like it is quite difficult to translate between structural elements in Revit and structural elements in like ETABS and Tekla. So we're really trying to focus on those workflows particularly, rather than trying to like be a sort of single source repository for all of your models in terms of completeness.
But for example, following your example, does a beam exist in Speckle, or it's just a structural element with certain properties and there's like a tag that says it's a beam?
Yeah, so we do have a schema for beams. The way that we generally tackle it is that we look at all of our connectors that we support. We try to produce a minimally viable schema. So what is the absolute minimum number of properties you would need to recreate this beam natively across the connectors that support beams?
Okay.
And then from there, we create more connector-specific schemas that attach additional properties that are specific to that software.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so a lot of this data is what it's like it's structured in different ways depending on the source, the authoring application. And as you author your functions through Automate, I think having a good knowledge of our objects kits and how the data is structured coming out of these connectors will be super important so that you can perform the right operations.
Just a slight addition to what Claire said is that at its heart, all Speckle data is data. Doesn't matter if it's 3D data or 2D or 1D or loads or just numbers, right? We don't differentiate, David. So loads are also valid Speckle data, right? So we do not have this sort of distinction that it cannot be represented. It is fully in the confines of what you can do, if that makes sense.
And just maybe to close there, on my end, would there also be like a generic data object in Speckle? Like in case we're doing like a custom development for something, we could do it with our own connector and it's just generic and work with it, correct?
Yes, there is. Yes.
Okay.
The short answer, there is a generic data model that you can use to represent your own data schema.
Yeah, it's a dynamic base object that at its core, it can support any type of dynamically attached properties on it. But I think even though we do technically have kits, we really only support, like what would be supported well is our objects kit across our connectors. If you want to develop your own schemas and you know what you're doing, then you can sort of set your expectation in terms of how they would be received across different connectors, but you would need to develop a kit, essentially your own kit to handle the conversions between your schema and the software native schema. Yeah, good questions. I think we had a hand raised.
It was Jack who raised his hand.
Yeah, that was me. I don't know if you can see me. I had issues with my camera a little while ago, so I had turned it off. It was kind of extending that question from David about, again, I'm a structural engineer and dealing with large data sets. I guess one of the things is, I guess it doesn't have to be structural, but is there firstly limitations on kind of model size? Because I know often for a structural engineer's model, the model data is a fraction of what the analytical data might be once you actually run an analysis. And you could be talking about megabytes to gigabytes, I dare say terabytes with some of the models that I run. And so that can obviously take a long time if you're uploading and if you're dealing with that on the server, and it's going to come to a point where it's, it becomes expensive to host that kind of scale in the cloud, and maybe some thoughts around that. If there's any limitations to that kind of workflow.
Do you know the current limitation, Gerga, for our server transport?
So we try to be flexible on this, and we try to be also clever around how that data gets stored and deduplicated on the server, right? So we have our own set of optimization logics that usually tend to transfer a few gig file into a couple hundred megs once it's stored on the Speckle server. So it wouldn't be the same amount of space required on our end. And also, we do not have hard limits on what we can support. Of course, like send and receive times are certainly impacted by the size of your model, but there is no strict boundaries on how big of a model you can push in. Of course, you'll get a crappy experience if you go into a terabyte size of models, but because we haven't tested that for that, but we did test on quite large models ourselves to try to ensure a smooth experience. And also what I wanted to add to this is, as Claire said, we are trying to focus on interoperability, as in not as in a fuzzy way of more like connectivity. So our focus is on making connections or communications. And for that, you might not always need to send the full model. So this can be broken down into multiple different projects or multiple models, depending on how you shape your workflow, right? And we try to be flexible on allowing you to shape your own workflow that makes sense for the given project.
And I would say, in terms of your user experience when sending models to Speckle, is it does depend on the specific host application. So, for instance, some host applications support multi-threading, in which case we can run multiple conversion operations in parallel, and then generally you'll be able to send larger amounts of data, like convert it more smoothly, versus applications that don't really support multi-threading, in which case you're kind of we're kind of limited by the API in a way. So some of it depends on that, and then the other part also depends on the quality of your data as well. So because we're storing everything as ultimately a serialized JSON, most of the processing time comes from accessing those objects through the API and making the necessary operations to transform them into Speckle objects. Ultimately, the size of your version, your commit that your JSON that you'll ultimately store in our server is determined. It's not necessarily always like one-to-one with, say, the number of objects you have in your file. Some of it depends on complexity. So if you have, one huge mesh with lots of vertices, or say like 10,000 small meshes with just a single face, how they perform in terms of the ultimate size of the commit that you're sending can be very different. I mean, they may be similar in some way because they have the same level of complexity in their data structure, and it takes longer to compose those elements. So it depends is the short answer. But we always try to optimize where we can in each connector to get a better and better experience, a faster experience for our users.
Thank you. I did have maybe one hopefully short question, kind of follow up, and I think you answered it when you started talking about the kits earlier on. And the question was, again, if you're looking at certain types of results or something, is there a way on Speckle to kind of using the automate function process results coming in so that you have, you could in theory create a view to look at certain types of results that wouldn't necessarily be in the native host software? Or are you kind of saying with the kits that rather than viewing that on Speckle itself, you're using Speckle as a way to kind of take that data, maybe have an automate function, but send that somewhere else to view it, in which case you might have to create your own kit? Or is there a way to more easily view that in the Speckle ecosystem without necessarily having to jump to code and code up your own kind of other connector or something like that, for example?
So I think, again, good question, Jack. A bit of spoilers. Yes, automate functions are sort of targeting this specific use case, right? So if you want to filter your data or restructure your data to show a specific part of a model that conveys a meaning to, let's say, your structural engineer only or your MEP engineer, or it's tailored for a specific use case, an automate function is definitely tailored to that use case. It already has a concept where your function can create a result view the same way that I did with the compositing of multiple models into one 3D view. An automate function can create the same, and it can tailor-make an experience as a result of a function run, right? So it gives you tools to communicate intent from the function authors. I'm a bit curious on what's the exact use case is for you so that we can learn and enable those use cases better. So maybe once we are back at the function authoring part of the workshop, let's have a chat about this, because I'm interested in what you want to get out of this.
Cool. Yep. Thanks.
Unless there are any other questions, I think we can take a quick break and then resume with the workshop. Before we do, just want to check that everyone has successfully managed to create an account on latest. Okay, yeah, and during the workshop segment, we'll have some breakout rooms available. We'll do also like a quick question in terms of code language preference. We have a Python and a C# SDK, and we'll have breakout rooms for tech support and whichever language you would like to work with. But yeah, maybe let's reconvene in like five or so minutes for people who want to take a quick break.
Yeah, and before we do that, one more item on the checklist, Claire, is if you want to follow along in our code, in our function author coding experience, we do require you to have a GitHub account. So if you don't have one, you can register one in the 5-minute break that we are having now.
All right, see you guys back here in at 4/11. I don't know when it is. 11. Okay, let's get started in a bit. Let's do a quick poll for how many people. I think we should get an idea of how many people have familiarity with our SDKs or general coding level assessment as well. So we do have a few different functions that we can author depending on how comfortable people are. Let's see, does Zoom have? Zoom doesn't have polling, does it? I don't think so.
I can't find it either.
We'll
If
do
anyone
it
knows.
Maybe
Old
we can
school.
go with reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So raise your hand if you're not familiar with our SDKs or you are not comfortable writing a few lines of code.
And so we have a handful of people. Maybe we'll do maybe we could have one breakout room that is basically the using the template function and just doing the object count version of it. For those that raise your hands, do you have a coding language of preference that you'd want to be working with? C# or Python? And then of the people that do have some familiarity with our SDKs, let's see, raise your hands if you prefer to code in Python.
Okay, this is now a bit
And
of a chaos. I don't get the same result as you would get from a poll.
okay, and
We'll wing
assuming
it, guys.
is there anyone with coding experience that wants to work with C#? Okay, yeah, so it does seem quite split. I think the original plan was for Girga to lead the main workshop and for Kat and I to have like breakout rooms for tech support. But since I think we do have quite a few people who don't have that much coding experience, how do you feel about leading a simple automate example in Python, Kat? Should we do that in the breakout rooms instead?
We can do that. I think it's super okay if we do the register a new function with our templates that doesn't strictly require any sort of coding experience, and then we can take it from there. I think we can stick in the main room for that initial
Yeah.
get-go of familiarizing yourselves with Automate, publishing very simple function, registering an automation. So everything that we've demoed so far, we're gonna try to do it together, and then we'll break out into separate rooms if someone's super advanced or super behind. But before we do that, we did prepare a few more slides to bootstrap you on your function authoring experience. This will be very quick, but I'll try to explain some of the basic building blocks of a function. Should I go present this part?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, let's go. Trying to start screen share again. Okay, so you should see my slides. If not, please shout. So the second part of today's session will be a workshop, a bit coding, but mostly a workshop where we will try to work together and onboard you to Automate, and with that onboard you to our new Speckle experience too. So I'll do a bit of introduction to functions. We're gonna publish a new Hello World-like function experience, and then we can take it from there and develop more sophisticated logics. And we did prepare a few examples, as Claire said. But before we get started, what does it mean to have a Speckle Automate function? What it looks like? Practically, it tries to be simple. It tries to be a simplistic approach to organizing business logic. It is a so-called command line application, which runs in a very simple terminal-like environment, and it receives three arguments or three data sets. And this will not be new for you, but what it receives, because we've shown the manifestations of these in our previous demos, right? So the first that a function receives or needs to receive or needs to support is the project context, which is a JSON blob that contains all the variables that allows it to bind into the context of the Speckle model project version and all of those relevant identifiers. So this gives the function a sense of the data, what it needs to operate with. And the second bit it receives is the user-defined values that we configured in the when we registered an automation. What is important in here is you as a function author, you have the power to shape the schema of these values. So if we get there, we'll show you how you can define what sort of values in what bounds users can supply to your functions. And the third argument is important for the function to be authorized to act on this data. It gets a Speckle token that allows it to act on behalf of the automation author in the project context. So it will be able to read the project data, it will be able to create new project data, and it will be able to attach metadata to all of the pre-existing objects or create arbitrary reports and PDFs and send it back to the Speckle server. What it is not allowed to do, and we try to be security and privacy conscious about this, is functions are not allowed to talk to external services per se. So the usual crypto miners, we try to be very and not allow them in. So it's a bit of a sandbox environment. So what functions are, but Speckle Automate functions are, they are allowed to talk to the Speckle server and operate on Speckle data. But currently that's the extent of it that they can do. To ease this, it might sound a bit daunting. To ease this, we try to do our best to help you as function authors to have a great developer experience. We have function examples that we publish in our own GitHub organization that shows a few different workloads that we already tested on Automate. We also have SDKs for Python and C# that are specifically tailor-made for the Speckle Automate experience to ease the authoring of functions. And also we provide function templates for these specific languages that will allow you to quickly get started with authoring a new function. So that's been the theory, and I'm now gonna jump into registering a new function, and this is the point where you guys need to get your hands dirty and follow me. So if anyone has questions from this point on, please raise your hand, shout. We'll stop, wait for you, and we'll try to get there together. Okay, the first bit that we go and make sure is that you can go to our latest server, which is latest.speckle.systems. You should be able to log in. And once you've logged in, you should see the same sample project that I have, because our new Speckle experience delivers this example project for you. If all of you have signed in, Katerina will help us, and she will share another project with you in the meantime that we will probably use for another demo that we prepared. So Kat, if you could get started on that, that would be amazing. So next up, I'm gonna go log into Automate, which is available via automate.speckle.dev, and I'm sharing the links in the chat because I realized that I haven't done so.
For the latest Speckle systems page, we're supposed to be the owner of that, right? I just see base design and building wrapper, and I'm the owner of those things. Like, we're the owner of each of ours.
Yes, so you get the sample project from us for which you are the owner. You are made the owner, right? So this is your project and your own and doesn't belong to anyone else. So whenever you onboard to our new experience, we create an example environment for you that is yours to trial and explore on your own. If that makes sense.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll use that sample project to register an automation, just like I did in the demo. So it's helpful to have some Speckle data already produced for you. Okay, and if you land on automate.speckle.dev, you should see on the top right a login with Speckle button, and this is our initial hoop that we need to jump through. And I'll wait
just
a few
try
seconds.
to click on that login, right? I get a screen access granted, and then it swaps to a 401 page, invalid access code. Maybe again, I'm the last one on the list. So
you're the last one. Sorry. Oh, okay. We'll try to work on that. Since this is like an alpha thing, we don't have it publicly available. So for whoever registered for the workshop, we allowed them to log in, but I'll ask around in our back channels, and we'll try to allow you to log in.
Thank you.
Just give me 1 second.
Can I also ask you to text me your email so I can invite you to the project?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Just
Does anyone else have?
quick
Go ahead.
confirmation so that everyone has to see only 2 sample projects, 2 versions, right? 2 models, base design and building wrapper.
Yes.
It's not exactly
Yes.
the same that you had. Okay, perfect. And they
Yes,
are
the
both
density one is created
cubes.
from the demo that I gave you. You can click on them. You can click on the cubes. The 3D preview that you see on my screen is an async generated image that gets processed depending on the load of the Speckle server. Since you guys joined immediately and this is our testing server, it's not at the same capability as our general availability server. So preview generation might punch up a bit. But you can click on the blue cube and it will definitely drop you into the 3D viewer experience, which you can use to validate that you have valid data in your models. Anyone else having trouble logging into Automate? If not, I'll move along soon. Jeroen, back channels are working on allowing you to access it. I'll let you know soon once you can retry. We'll move along and I'll try to move not super quickly so you can catch up. Okay, so we are back at trying to create a new function, right? So we are going to focus on the top part of the landing page where it says functions. Since you now logged in and is now a valid contributor to the Automate platform, you can click on the new button, which will ask you to authorize Speckle Automate. This is a GitHub application that needs access to your GitHub data so that it can create a repository and it can set up the contents of that repository so that you have a great experience altering functions. It will ask you to give it some permissions, and once you've done that, you should land on this template selector screen. And Jeroen, you should also be able to retry to log in just about now. Let me know how that goes.
I think he might have just left, so I'll let him know when he's rejoined.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't see him. Okay. So should I move along and select a starter template, or does anyone else have any problems getting here? If not, I'm gonna move on and then we can circle back. So I'm gonna select Python as our function template. And I will walk through this wizard that will ask a few questions about the function itself. So I'd like to fill this out. It asks for an image that you can use to identify your function. I have this guy here as my trusty image, and I'm gonna name my function. In the description editor, you can use, if you are familiar with Markdown syntax, you can use Markdown to write your documentation. This documentation will be visible to anyone who sees your function. And we try to render a nice doc page from this. This is where I show you how we try to tackle the supported source apps. Is once you start authoring a function, in this form, you get to select from a list of source applications. This list of source application is generated from all of the supported host apps that we have. So you can mark any number of host applications that you want to allow your function to process data from. Currently, this selection is not strictly enforced in the Automate runtime environment, just because we are still in early evaluation phase, but we will use these selected source applications to halt the function execution if the current model version is not coming from a supported source app. What you can also do as a function author is write tags, dynamic tags to your function. This will allow the marketplace experience to group or search these functions. So I'm gonna tag this with a hello and AECtech tags. And the last bit that you need to choose is if you have access to a GitHub organization, let's say your company has a GitHub organization, you can choose to create your function inside that organization, or you can leave it as the default value, which will use your personal GitHub account, right? So if you select your organization, of course, it will mean that all of your code is shared across your company organization repos, and multiple people can collaborate on the same source code of your function. That's all there is to it that you need to give in this form. And then I'm gonna click next, which will go ahead and register this request for a new function. And it will also go talk to my GitHub account. So it will take a few seconds to process. And this is the moment where I'm gonna stop and wait for you to catch up. If you do not have the GitHub organization option, Jack, then most probably you don't have access to any GitHub organizations. And we don't ask you that question because it's not relevant.
I should do. I thought it might have been
You
because
should do.
yeah, I do. I have several. But my company recently upgraded to GitHub Enterprise, and I'm wondering is there something blocking it? I'm not sure.
Good question. It also could be that you need to specifically authorize the GitHub application, the Speckle Automate GitHub application, to act inside your organization. If you haven't done that, you might need to check back and do that.
Okay, thanks.
Which template did I choose? I chose the Python template. I recommend you either choose the Python or the C# template. Those are our most mature templates.
I think for the sake of following along with this demo for new coders, I would pick the Python one just to be able to follow along with what Georgo's doing.
For those of you who've landed already on this page, this is already success. Your function has been created. So if you go check out your GitHub account, you will see the function. But also we try to give you a few actionable items from here that you can go check out the function. So there are three options. You can go and open your repository on GitHub with the Open Repo button. You can use our Git clone options to clone your repository locally if you have a local dev environment and you want to want to work on that. And for those of you who don't, we also provide a GitHub Codespaces experience for functions. So our function templates are set up to support GitHub Codespaces. And I'm going to click on that and let that rip in the background, because this does take a minute or two to spin up this development environment. What this
And
does
again,
is,
for anyone that's new to it, select the code space option, assuming that you don't have a local development environment.
correct. Codespaces will land you in a pre-configured development environment that we try to tailor to be working in a browser, and also support all the features of developing a Speckle Automate function.
So all the default settings there, branch, machine type, etc., are okay to just accept?
Correct, yes. Just click next on the default settings, yes.
For this demo, I think VS Code should be fine.
Whatever you are comfortable with, Peter. It's not going to be super heavy on the coding side, so you don't need Visual Studio if you don't have that on hand. Okay, quick raise of hand. Who still haven't arrived on this page? All of you did. Great. Good to hear. So this point on, my Codespaces environment has completed to build its development container. It's still loading stuff. I'm not going to go super deep into all of the components here, just because I want to focus on the actual experience of what it feels like to release a function and publish it to Automate, right? So what we're gonna do is we're not gonna deep dive in the code itself, but we're gonna push this code through the pipelines and have that built and released into Automate. So in order to do that, I would like you to open your repository. On GitHub. And once you are on your GitHub repository, what we envision as a function publishing experience is GitHub has this notion of releases that says, hey, my current state of the project is ready for a new release. So what we do is we support the releases workflow of GitHub. On the right here, there is a create new release button that will drop you into a very simple form that you can use to release your new function. The releasing bit is kind of simple. It requires you to put in a tag. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the 0.0.1 tag to create a very basic, simplistic tag. And I'm going to name my release as that. And then I'm going to click on the Publish New Release button. And what... Oh,
excuse me, how did you click release button?
Okay, let me show you. I'm going back. Okay, of course. Yeah, thanks for stopping me. So once you are on your repository, I'm assuming that you open this this page. It might look a bit different if you have used the C# template. But on the right here, it says releases. And in here, let me zoom in a bit because this is super small. So in here, there is a create new release button. And that's the actual link that you need to click to land on this page. Did you find it?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm currently releasing the 0.01 version. And I'm writing a few release notes to publish this with. Once I'm done with that, I'm gonna hit the publish release button. And practically that's all there is to it that you need to do to release your function. At this point on, the automations that we registered for you when you created your repository now kick in. And inside GitHub, there is this notion of actions that are, funnily enough, is GitHub's own CI/CD platform, which is now running an action that we registered for your repo that is tailor-made for Automate. So what this will do is it will take the content of your current code, it will package it up into a format that is compatible with Automate, and it will run it through a release pipeline to publish this new version into Speckle Automate under your name. So this also takes a minute or two to complete. And while we wait for that, I'm going to ask again if anyone is stuck in this process or not. If I'm going too slowly, you can also give that feedback too.
I am actually having issues. I have started with C# before you suggested Python. And for the releases, it says I need to create a tag. It doesn't allow me to create a release.
Have you clicked on the page where in the releases, let me create a new one. Have you selected the choose a tag?
Yeah.
And did you input a value here? Something like 0.0.1.
I didn't.
If you have, you could have to click on the create new tag button once you've entered the value. And so this is a bit tricky because you need to create something that GitHub calls a tag, and you also need to name your release. So it won't let you release without the tag. That might be the gotcha that you need to do. Okay, perfect.
Same for me. For some reason, I get the same message. It says we weren't able to create the release for you. Make sure you have a valid tag. And I basically input the same number, 0, 0, 1.
Okay, I know this is crappy. This is mostly a feedback session towards GitHub's user experience. You need to click on this button that says create new tag, and it's a small text below. That gets me every time. So yes, once you've pasted in or you typed in the tag value, you need to manually click on this button that will forcefully tell it to please use this as a tag value for me.
I did. It still doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like same thing. Drop that menu, create new tag, and input. Then I don't know. Maybe I'll try a different number.
Okay, I think you should have screen share powers. So if either of you are okay with sharing your screen with the group, if you can diagnose this super quickly.
Yeah, it worked for me. It's just a little flaky, like it's not happened the first time, but it's there.
Okay, good. It's good that the first failure in this demo is GitHub's, not ours.
Maybe Gerga, you could create a breakout room as well. Just
okay, I'm gonna do that. Good point. Breakout rooms. Okay, I've created 2 breakout rooms, one for C# and one for Python. So if you can't work around the flakiness of this button, then I think Claire or Kat will happily help you to figure it out in a separate room.
Maria, if you're having issues still with the GitHub, you can step into the C# one and I'll join you and we can troubleshoot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna ignore this draft release that I have here because the workflow run of my 0.0.1 action has completed. In the meantime, you see it took 2 minutes and it ran everything on my initial commit. So at this point, we have released our first function and we can go back to Automate and look for it. So I'm gonna close this one here. And in the functions page, I'm gonna click on view all and I am gonna search for AECtech and I see you guys are publishing your functions already. So on my screen, you can see that, hey, the function marketplace is an open marketplace. Once you publish a function, it is there. In the long run, we are gonna look into how you can manage access controls for your functions. For our initial release, every function is public and anyone can reuse your logic. So that's what we are going with. So in here, you can use your predefined name that you can use to search for all your own functions. And here I found mine. And this will show me that, hey, this is the landing page of this specific function. So if you land it here, you can find a few links, most specifically back to the GitHub repository that created this function, right? So this allows you to easily inspect the code that you're gonna use in your automations. We require all GitHub repositories to be public in order to be publishable to Automate as a function. So automation authors can validate the code that they are gonna use in their projects, right? We also give a bit of information on when this was last updated, how many automations are using this function, and it will give automation authors a bit of sense of like, hey, is this function popular? What's is the logic in there trustworthy, and so on and so on. And in here, you'll see some of the documentation that was generated from the bit that I typed in, and also from the README of the function coming from the GitHub repository. And as the last step of this first workshop, I would like you to also register your own function as an automation. So I'm gonna now click on the Create Automation button, which will use this function to create a new automation for you. So this will be the...
I'd like to ask another maybe dummy question. Is there any way to, when you see the functions that owned by me, like author, is there any filter option instead of search? Because
yes,
I don't remember.
Will be.
I don't remember what I call it.
What you can, there will be show me my own functions. That one is still in development, so it hasn't landed just yet. What you can do is, if you have your GitHub repository open, the name of the GitHub repo will correlate with your function name. So you can use that to search for your own function, if that helps you. Do mind that GitHub is sort of picky about repo names, so it will replace spaces in your function names with dashes. So that might be a bit tricky to find, but if you start searching for the first few characters, it should get you there. If you can't find it, you can just as well use mine. The logic in there is very possibly the same. So So if you guys landed here, you go ahead and use this function to create an automation, right? And then now you're back in the same flow that we showed in our initial demo, where we took a function and we bound it into a project. So this is where it's useful to have access to the sample project. I'm gonna use that again. Select sample project, base design as a model, and I'm gonna name my automation. And this particular function that we have in our template, it is a very simple, very crude model quality check function. It asks for a specific speckle type that should never, ever be inside the model. So in order for us to find something that is reasonable for this, I'm going to open the 3D viewer on latest. And if you explore the model and select, let's say, this beam in here, on the top right, you will see that here's an object explorer that you can open. This will give you insight into the data that is stored in the Speckle server. And in here, you will find an attribute that is called Speckle type. This is what we use to identify what type of object this is. This one currently is a BREP. So I'm going to say that, hey, let's not have BREPs in this project because it is not supported by the structural software. They cannot properly receive BREPs in there. They want to have proper beam and floor data, right? So I'm gonna use BREP as an example and pass it into the parameters. This is just a string, so you can pass in anything in here. And I'm gonna click finish, which will register this automation. Thanks, Matthew. That's good feedback. And we are also guilty of having a lot of Hello World functions. What you've gotten access to is our development environment. And this is definitely cluttered by us, alpha testing Automate. So this is on our radar to have a sort of filtering / ordering mechanism to rank functions based on how many automations are using them, and extra metrics that can allow us to not prioritize the demo functions. We're also thinking in something in lines with, if you are coming with the Hello World examples like you are, GitHub has metadata that this was created at this time, so many commits and so on, which we have access to. So we can use that data to give us a better sense of what functions we should prioritize in the marketplace. And we created our automation, and I'm going to trigger my automation on the base model, and so should you. And I'm going to wait for that to complete. In the meantime, if you have questions, let me know.
So is it possible that my function is not created even if I did all the process, but I still didn't see in the list?
You didn't see it in the list. Okay. Can you double check in your GitHub repository? There on top, there is this actions page, and you should see a successful action on top here. If you can't see your function, it's because the action itself has not succeeded.
Yeah, I see an error. Is view workflow file. Should I delete the workflow run and then to recreate again? As I can see it was failed in somehow.
I think I'm gonna jump in with you into a separate room to take a look
Okay.
at what's going on. Claire, would you mind taking over the presenting roles?
Sure. Should I
Joining
continue with the
station.
run through of the function?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can do that. I think my function should have completed by now.
Or actually, why don't I step into the breakout room and help Alcin?
Okay, that's also possible. Okay. Unfortunately, I left a bit of a bug in the function. Yes, David, we are working on streaming logs. For now, the logs only appear once the function completes running. Streaming logs should be ready in a week or so. In the meantime, what I'm gonna do is, if you followed me on the example, I unfortunately left a small bug in the example Python code. Sorry about that. We can fix that together. Did you figure it out, Claire? You're muted.
It's an issue with the C# template code, so I don't think it builds properly. So we'll have to.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a quick look at that while you continue.
Okay. Status says running. Yes, please try to refresh the page and click on run logs. That usually tends to update the status of your automation. Once you've landed on this in this failure state that I've landed on, you can also go in and check the state of your sample project. And you should also see that on the base design, we now have, you should see at least one failed run. And if you click that donut up there, you'll get information about what function, what automation produced what result. And in the meantime, I'm going to look into fixing the internal code. It is in the set context view. Okay, so we just landed this feature around context views that goes into what we talked about, Jack. I think with the current example, we have a bit of an issue with the context views. So I'm gonna, in your example function in line 80, if you use the Python starter, I would like to ask you to comment this line out or to delete the call to the set context view function. And I'm going to run through very quickly on the process of publishing publishing a new version of the function. Oh.
I think I may have found the problem with the .NET starter. Gerga.
Okay.
I'll need you to.
In the meantime, I commented out the part that's failing, and I'm gonna quickly show you a way to push a new version of your function without creating a release. This is mostly targeting developers testing their own functions. You can push a new function release without actually creating an official one. It will not have the nice release tag, but you can, in situations like this where you want to quickly check if your fix worked, you can go into the GitHub Actions build and deploy Speckle function tab, and there will be a button that will allow you to manually run the same workflow that pushes a new release. And I'm gonna click on that. This will update the function version that's live on Automate. So what we have planned for the remaining hour and a few minutes is two things. We would love to hear your feedback from what you've seen. And also, we still have a bit of time to dive deeper into code, but I was going to ask who wants to work a bit on function logic with us and in what capacity, because we did bring a few examples, both for Python and .NET, that we can work on in breakout rooms. So what is your preference moving forward? I probably should do a better so David says, I missed if you committed the change or did you just edit in the Git? I committed the change, yes. So if you are editing in GitHub Codespaces, you need to create a new commit and push that commit into GitHub. So you need to synchronize your repository. And the action that I did in the actions table is I went into action, build and deploy Speckle function, and you need to select this build and deploy Speckle function. This is the pre-registered GitHub action that we give you. And on top right, here's a run workflow button that I use to trigger a new function release.
I am trying to catch up with the Python template
Okay.
this time. It's all good. I'm going into create the automation. There's one step that we are adding the parameters. Is there any way that you have a kind of screenshot for this? Like,
What the value should be?
yes, I just put the snapshot on the chat.
Okay, yes. So the way that you can grab a parameter name is by going into our 3D viewer. And in here, you can explore your model. And if you click on a specific object on the top right, you will see this object explorer that you can use to get a deeper look into what the data is inside the object explorer. And here you'll find this speckle type that you can use to copy paste, right? I'm giving you not a specific value, I'm giving you a way to access the value that you want to get to, right? And you can go around and explore.
What was the sample type that you used, Kirko? Was it just brep?
I used breps. Yeah, I used objects.geometry.brep, which will mark most of this model invalid because most of this is breps, if not all.
If you put that that string in that field, you should be able to run your automation and get a failed result.
So as a last bit of wrapping up my demo, I wanted to talk about one implementation gotcha and one sort of restriction that we impose, and that goes into answer your question, David, of is there a way to unpublish functions that's already in use? Currently, no. We are looking for a deprecation workflow. But what's very important for us is to not break other people's automations, right? So as long as a function is not super malicious, we'll not allow it to be pulled from the marketplace because we want to ensure that automations are not broken by deleting a function. So once you publish the release, there is no way to unpublish it. We're gonna add a feature which says you can mark it deprecated and it will show warnings on the automation pages that, hey, you are running a deprecated function. And also to ensure stable behavior, what we don't do is we do not migrate automations to new versions of functions. So in here, you'll see I'm using this function. We are landing a new feature early next week here that says if a new version of this function is released, like there is one for me, you will see a pop-up here that says, hey, you are running an older version of these functions. Do you want to migrate? So we do not update the functions in your automations automatically. Automation authors will need to do that manually. We'll give warnings. Until that is landed, you need to disable your current automation like I just did, and we need to start from scratch. So I'm gonna try to successfully run now my function that I fixed. I'm gonna go a bit quicker this time. And finishing up. And thanks, Peter. That's a good suggestion we should look into how an Automate workflow can utilize third-party Python libraries. It's definitely fully supported, and we can look into it in the next hour.
I think for this last hour, what I could do is step into the C# breakout room, and for anyone that wants to dig into the code and basically replicate the demo that we saw earlier, the mesh density calculator demo in C#. I can run through that. We could do a workshop on that in the breakout room. And then for everyone else that is working with Python, you can just stay in the main room with Girgu.
And also what I think we could do is if so in the main room, I'll try to stay on the high level nodes. And if you want to go dive deeper in Python code, Kat can go into the Python room and she can answer specific questions about, or maybe even walk through one of our Python examples together. It is CPython 3, the environment that we support. So yes, you can use NumPy and ML libraries. Yeah, it is fully valid to reference those. We do have quite a few function examples ourselves that are heavily utilizing NumPy to do some number crunching. Okay, so this one now completed after my fix that I published. And if I go back into our project dashboard, this will tell us that my Now It Works automation failed because it found 64 objects that have the forbidden speckle type that was checked by our very crude model quality check automation. So this one sort of wraps up that initial step of the workshop. I'm gonna get started on setting up the environment for our demo. I'm going to use the GitHub code spaces that was created for my function. You can follow along there if you want, or you can also, if you are comfortable with that, clone the repository and set up your local environment. One note for Python people, we use a package called Poetry for package management. If you do not have that available, I'm gonna drop a link for you on how to get started, and Kat is super good at installing Poetry because she's been doing it quite a few times in the past. So she'll help you figure that out. in the code space editor, all of these should be available for you. So I'm going to use these tools. Should I start moving along and start exploring the internals of the function? Does Speckle support the Conda environment? Our SDK does, but for Automate we do not. So in Automate we package up the function into a Docker environment, and Conda is a bit bloated for that. So we try to choose a leaner solution. So our default template is not geared towards a Conda environment. You can make it work, but it's a bit more involved process. Okay. So to get us started, I'm gonna walk through on the internal logic of the function that we used to run the forbidden Speckle type check, and I'll show you some of the boundaries in which you can operate to author your own function. So if you are with me in the GitHub code spaces, I've just opened the main.py file, and I'm going to zoom in because I realized text is super small. And feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have questions or something is not clear. So in this main.py file, what you'll see is all of the function logic that you need to write for everything to happen that you've seen in my demos. So if this function inputs class is familiar, it is because we use this function inputs class to generate the form that you've seen that asks for a forbidden Speckle type. So the name of the field here, the title of the field, and the description, all of these are tools that should be familiar to Python programmers. And we use a few clever trickeries to take this class and turn it into a data schema that we use to create the form on Automate that will allow you to input, or allow the automation authors to input values that the function needs. This field itself can also include data validators like less than, greater than, needs to have a length, and so on. So there's a bit of flexibility that you as a function author can explore. It's also possible that your function doesn't require an input on its own. So in that case, you can remove this. And later down here, I've put in code comments of an example is how to write a function that doesn't take any inputs. I'm going to ignore that for the sake of showing how to work with inputs, but it's definitely fully supported. So input schema definition 1. Step number 2 is what I'm named automate function here. This is practically the business logic of what's executing inside automation. And practically what you will get from here is in order to get the nice developer experience that we tailored for you function authors, you need to write a function that takes something that we call an automation context. This is practically an SDK helper object that will give you a lot of handy methods to work with automation data. So for those of you who are familiar, I remember there are a few of you who are familiar with our SDKs. You know that it is a bit of an involved process to receive Speckle data. We know that, we heard you. And inside Automate, what we've done is the automation context that your function receives from the Automate execution environment has a method that says, hey, let me just receive the version that triggered this automation, right? So all of that setting up Speckle clients and authenticating and checking which project, which model, which version, or stream branch commit in the old terminology. All of these are now hidden away in this convenience method that gives you access to the Speckle data that is the root of all of your data in this given model version. Right. So with this first line, I received the data, and in here we also added a very simple flatten function which says, hey, I want to iterate over all of the elements of this model. Let's walk through them and let's work with the Speckle data. This is also, again, a crude way of iterating through. If you want, we can go into how to. There are many different ways in traversing a Speckle object tree. We can also take a look at a more detailed example if you'd like. But in here, what you see is practically I'm saying I want all of the objects that are in this model. And for each of them, I'm checking if the object's Speckle type matches the function input's forbidden Speckle type. That's all there is to it. If it is matching that, I'm saying that, hey, this object that I found here produces an error. And in the end, if there are any errors in my model, I'm gonna mark my run as a failure. If not, we can mark it as a success, and that completes the simple check pass criteria. All right. So far, so good. Do you have questions? If not, I'm gonna show the answer to Peter's question on how you can start to work with third-party Python packages inside the function. So we are using, as I said, we are using Poetry to manage package versions. And what you need to do is practically use that application to add a new reference for your project. There is very little limitation in what Automate supports. What Automate doesn't support, sorry. So we currently, what we do not support is, at the moment, we do not give access to GPUs on the machines, and we do not support Windows execution environments. GPUs is coming sooner than Windows, but it's not at the moment available. But if you are sticking to CPU-bound workloads, you can definitely run your calculations. So I'm going to add NumPy into our current environment, which you do by Poetry add. You type in NumPy, and you click Enter, which will go ahead and try to install it. If I've done something wrong in my package definitions, because Speckle Automate relies on a version. Okay, let's see that we say that, okay, we are supporting Python 3.11. Sorry, there's a broken Python version marker in there. Like that. So instead of a caret 3.11, you need a tilde 3.11 to fix the issue. And that will succeed in adding NumPy as the dependency of the project. And from that point on in your mean.py, as you would use NumPy in a very simple Python script, you can do import NumPy as NP and get access to all of the methods inside NumPy, and then you can do whatever you want with your NumPy data. That's the extent of what you need to do to add a third-party package. So we try to stick to as close as possible upstream Python scripting experience. And all of our automations and workflows and whatnots are set up to support adding your custom packages or logic that you can imagine in here. To give you an example, Automate is super not picky about what it runs. So you can start, we already successfully ran Blender inside Automate. And we were scripting stuff inside Blender, and we were producing data modifications. So we were pushing in Python scripts into Blender that was receiving Speckle data and was making modifications on Speckle data. So yes, Automate is not super picky. As long as you stick to some of the conventions that we set up, we'll support you for a long way. So at this point, we sort of have 40 minutes left from our session. What I think we could do is not to go into very deeply into editing code. What I can show you is another example that we prepared for this workshop, which is a bit, the internal logic of the function itself is a bit more involved. It does something more useful than just checking for a speckle type. And I think we could walk through the implementation of that code, and I can show you some of the tools that we provide that you can use to mutate the speckle data inside an Automate function. Oops, I already have this one. So raise of hands, we have two options. One is a more detailed demo into the 3D mesh density checker, which is option number one. And option number two, we have prepared a demo that is working on Revit data. It checks for a few internal parameters that should never ever leak to external collaborators, and it will delete secret parameters from the Revit shared parameter set. So what it will do is it will receive your Revit models, it will filter every single parameter set, and it will delete those that we mark as secrets. Which one do you want to look into? Option two from Michael. Okay. Option. Ooh. Okay. Okay. A lot of interest in Revit. How am I not surprised? Okay, we can go that way. We named that Deep Clean. We suck at naming, I know. Let me just fork this very quickly. Hello. And all of these examples are available on Automate, and we can also share the repos with you. I'm gonna create a new code space environment for this, so that we can take a look. And while that's booting up, let me open the function here. Okay, so in here, you'll see exactly the same structure, top level structure, where we have a function inputs for starters in the main.py, and we have an automate function that does something very similar. This one also receives the commit root object, and it sets up a few rules. This is what I mentioned about how you can traverse the Speckle object tree. It's a specific beast on its own. We've provided a logic in this example, which will be tailor-made for Revit. So this function is definitely marked as it only supports Revit, because this is working on parameters and Revit specific object structures, right? So we set up a traversal rule that will allow us to walk through the Revit specific data structure of a commit. And we also made this function so that it's not only capable of removing attributes, but you can take this example from on your own and add extra actions on top if you want. So we did add a few actions on our own. The default that we are rolling with is called removal action, which will say, hey, if there's a forbidden parameter, then let's remove that from the parameter set itself. So what this will do is it will use the traversal context to walk through the Speckle objects, and it will check if there's a parameter, and it will execute a specific parameter logic based on this checker that says, hey, does this parameter have the forbidden prefix? If so, then apply the registered action on top of it. So what this does is this particular function in place mutates the data of your commit object, and it will create a new commit version on a new model that you can use, for example, to push data towards external collaborators. So in that way, we are sort of catering a safe collaborator model from internal data. So after we walk through and I'm realizing now that text is also very, very small. So after we walk through the Revit objects, we also mark the run succeeded or failed, depending on what the status was. Well, we also use the automate context provides this convenience method. Again, for those of you who know how involved it is to create a new version or new commit with our SDKs, the automate context gives you a convenience method that says, hey, I want to create a new version inside the same project that this automation runs in. You practically give us the data that you want to send. You mark what model name you want to send this model to, and you add an extra version message into it, and this will practically produce the data stream for your cleansed data. Okay. Code space is booted. So if you want, we can go into and check out a bit of the part that says, hey, let's check for Revit parameters. Let's traverse the objects themselves. The traversal bit, I would love to not discuss here because it's a bit more involved. We're gonna send this out and you'll get access to it, but it can be tricky on its own. What I would love to look into is, for example, these rules that we've said, and how I said this example also can be extended from if you take it and run with it, is practically in here. We said when we are going through the parameters of each object, right? We take the parameter set and we travel through all of the parameters. And in here, what we've done is we've created this has for rhythm prefix rule checker, which practically takes a look at the parameter name. I have it here on the right? So we pass in what prefix we want to check for, we get the parameter, and it will just make sure that it doesn't start with the given name, right? So you can take this and modify it to match your internal standards, or however you want to validate the parameter set of a given Revit object. We also added some checks for, hey, does this parameter have a missing value, where you can specify that every outgoing Revit data object needs to have some specific parameter set. Let's say you are going for a fire rating standard, and then you need to ensure that all of your walls that are in the model and all the doors have their fire rating parameter set, right? So you can ensure that every object in this version has a fire rating parameter name set. Okay, what else did we prepare? We also prepared a rule that says you can specify in what a given parameter name should match to as on a type. So if it's a string or number or something else. But you can also take this list and extend it for yourself. And as a complementary to this, we also added a few actions. So in the internal logic, what we have here if the parameter matches this filter, you can apply actions to it. And we added a few we added an example action to it, which says this is the prefix removal action, which says if your parameter matches the prefix, let's take the parameter set and drop it from the set itself and flag it as, hey, this object had an invalid parameter. I could go in deeper, but I see I've rambled on for long enough and I might be losing some attention, which is understandable after 2.5 hours. So I'm gonna pause here and give you guys the floor to ask questions. Did I give you enough insights in how to work with Revit data for those of you who asked for a Revit function demo? If you'd like to see this in action, we can also very quickly register this function. We did prepare a quick demo. That would be helpful. Okay. So let me go in and try to do this. Kat, did you invite me to one of those example projects? Or which of my accounts did you invite to?
That's a good question. Let me re-invite you just in case. I will invite all your accounts.
Okay, well, I'm typing in my demo email to you. That's the wrong. Okay, this is the right account. Thank you for finding me. Okay, so we prepared a demo project that has on the main a version of the Revit sample project, which also has been tainted by some invalid parameters that we've marked. So we're going to use our function on this to discover which of these elements have that name. And I'll need to remember what it is.
I just tested with family name and it worked.
With family name?
Yeah, both start with capital family name.
Yes, we did prepare a the secret one. So yes, we should be checking for the secrets. Okay, so I'm going back to Automate. I'm looking for this deep cleanse function. Deep clean function, which I'm gonna use and register into demo project 1. I'm gonna run it on main, and so the prefix that we are checking for is secret here. And I'm gonna click finish and run this automation very quickly. Do keep in mind that all automations are triggered whenever you push a new version into the Speckle server. So I'm using the convenience of triggering things for quicker feedback, but these runs are automatically triggered on every single new version. So all of these integrations are continuously running on in the background. You do not need to go in and check in on them. It's good enough if you land on your Speckle front end. And those of you who have eagle eyes saw that there was a small yellow bit here that was marking that there was an automation running here. And now it already passed. It completed, and it also generated a new cleansed version that got updated a few seconds ago. And if I'm not mistaken, this will have some data around the parameters in here will not have the secret values that you've seen. So let me double open this twice. So I'm going to open in this tab the original version that was in the main model. And I'm going to go explore these objects. And I know that the Revit beams in here have some parameters that they shouldn't have. Like these have the secret parameter here, there, and there. And if I go in and try to look at this beam in the Object Explorer, it now does not have those secret parameter values. I hope this was a good enough explanation into what this function does. So we can treat this cleansed model as safe for collaborators. That's what the demo is meant to showcase. Matthew has a question. If I can talk a bit about shared models. Let me try to grok that. The second bit is correct. They would not have access to the automation logs because only the automation author has access to the automation logs. So we do not give access to that to anyone. It's the automation authors who control access to the logs. And correct, the model would be only visible after the automation ran, because in this cleansed model that we have here, all the data is generated by the automation itself. So it ingests the original model and strips the data or ensures that no secrets are leaked and produces a completely new version that only gets generated after the function completed. So yes, there is no way that data before that gets accessed. Absolutely, that is one specific use case that is fully supported by Automate Mia, is that you can with the rule sets that I've shown you in the example, you can search for missing parameter names, filter for specific objects, and you can send that to a new model that says, hey, these are missing fire rating parameters, or cost parameters are not set on doors or railings or whatever's. We do not make assumptions. You can take your own decisions, but it's definitely something that is a very valid use case in this example too. What we haven't shown you, but our SDKs do give powers for automation authors, is currently the front-end implementation or the viewer implementation of this is still under development. But there is a special type of automation result that I haven't talked a lot about just yet. So because we currently do not have a good way of showing it to you, we'll have soon. But we also allow the same sort of workflow that you asked for, Mia, via not sending it to a new model. But what you can do is you can attach specific metadata to your models. So let's say you found your automation found some missing parameter objects. Our SDKs are already supported. Our SDKs already support this. So let me look for an example of this here. In which one? Let's say the initial example that we used for checking for invalid speckle types. In this function, you can see a usage of another method on the automate context object that we give you. This says attach error to objects. So you can punch in a collection of objects that do not fit, or they produce a certain error category. Let's say they are missing a specific parameter, and this will attach a metadata object into this collection. We'll also support specific 3D viewer overrides that will allow you to better identify this in our 3D viewer on the online viewer. That will be a bit leaner experience than having to select and send to a new model. We are already aware of this as being one of the primary use cases of simple model quality checks, to be able to flag objects that produce errors, or they have warnings, or they have informations. We do support all of these to attach them, and the viewer support for that to be able to visualize it is coming to land to our front end too. So what we envision this to be in our blessed workflow is in this 3D viewer. Let's say in here, these objects are missing a certain parameter, then they will be colored red. and you will see an actionable item that says, hey, in this version, these objects are missing a cost parameter. Please set it, and then you can review that.
There is another question.
Do you want to take Matthew's question? I'm not sure I fully understand what he means.
If I understand correctly, the element level data, then no, it is not only element data level that Speckle is storing. It can be any in any hierarchy, depending on the host software. For example, Rhino can send the data that's shared across different layers or different views. The GIS can send the data around different, again, layers or tables and so on. If you send the data by yourself, you can nest them also indefinitely and attach properties at individual level or at collection level. So if that was your question, I guess, depending how the connector is handling that or how your custom code is handling that, but it does need to be individual level, individual element that has all the properties.
And I'll take Peter's question. If I get yours correctly, you're asking about can we export these object level results back into Revit API? Am I understanding you correctly? So what we've scoped for that is we're not going to push the data back into the Revit API. But what we are going to look into is to integrate this data into our Speckle connectors. So our desktop user interface will be able to show these automation object level data in the desktop viewer interface, and it will do its best to correlate that with the data that is available in Revit, right? So what the workflow that we're looking into is you can see object level results in desktop UI in the Speckle connector. You can click on them and it will, let's say, select or isolate the given object group that produced the result that you selected. So it will allow you to select all of the doors that do not have their cost set by scrolling through all of the automation results and clicking them, and we'll integrate that that way via the Revit API, right? So we most probably won't push that data onto objects, but we'll try to do a bit of communication, if that makes sense.
Got it. Thank you. So for directly interacting with the Revit interface or Revit API data is the connector, the original Speckle that's handling that side.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
the connector will do its job to grab your automation data and correlate it with your current model.
Are there any potential plans for Speckle or Speckle Automate to collaborate or integrate with Autodesk Platform Service, formerly known as Forge?
No plans yet, is what I can tell you.
Okay.
Not particularly, no. We sort of see
I see.
Automate as
Sorry,
a
that's a
parallel
little bit.
thing.
Yeah, sorry if that's a little bit out of blue, since the interface and a lot of functionality does remind me of Autodesk Platform Surface, both the way the viewer and some of the model data is handled and the way you guys present the interface.
At this point, it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. We think so because yeah, these things tend to converge on a certain on certain patterns. Like if you go out and look for all of the CI/CD platforms that are software industry specific, they all tend to look very similar just because of their nature, right? So we are operating on 3D data with custom functions. These things tend to look similar or behave similar. For us, it's very important that it's talking the Speckle 3D open ecosystem language, and it's not locking you into Autodesk's own platform. And also, as I said in the beginning, Automate is not nothing more than a convenience environment. It doesn't bring anything extra to that you couldn't do before in the Speckle ecosystem. To answer your question, Michael, I think we're gonna give your access open for a few days, and I want to flash our last slide as a closing thing for this workshop. Is we are in a few weeks' time we have our conference SpeckleCon coming up, where we will demo a lot more functionalities. And before that, we might pull this instance of Automate because we are gearing up for a granular trickle of people getting access to Automate. We are going to share a form that you will be able to apply to get early access, but this environment will practically go away, so you will lose access for it. We'll definitely be keen to hear from you. So once the new environment is up, that will be considered more stable than the current one. You can be on the top of the list if that is a good enough answer. But yeah, do stay tuned and join in on our SpeckleCon, where we will show off more of Automate. And yeah, we have some exciting examples as well. Jack asks, will there be more examples or documentation about how we can interact more with the front-end viewer? Yes, there will be more examples. They haven't been published yet because we are still baking the exact functionality into the viewer. So it's currently in a bit of state of flux. So we haven't published anything just to not serve quickly changing functionalities to you, but should land by SpeckleCon. It's definitely in the works. And also, Kat, you've shared the link to our SpeckleCon registration form that you can take a look and sign up. It's a free online event. And I think we'll also have quite a few Automate sessions there too. What we thought of having as a follow-up is we will prepare a short survey. We would love to get your feedback on what you've seen, and mostly around what you're missing or what your specific use cases will be. As I said, we would love to have you as members in the early access for Automate. Once we launch the stable version around mid-November, and we would love to shape it in a way that it allows the workflows that you want to bring into the platform with yourself. So we'll prepare a short survey, and we would super appreciate if you could take the time to add some suggestions and feedback to us. But that's been mostly it that we've prepared. If you have questions, we'll stick around until the top of the hour, also longer if needed.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Also for everyone, we've been recording this session, so it's probably going to take a few weeks' time. I'd say 2 or 3 weeks' time, but we'll put this up on YouTube actually, so everyone can catch up later if they wish.
Okay.
Now, maybe by that time, Automate is already out of date that we've seen today, but guess
Very
we gotta
hopefully, yes.
live with
the
that.
kinks are out of date.
Thanks, guys. That was great.
I think the link on what Katerina shared, Jack, does a good job at converting times into your time zone. Most probably the time zone is UK times. I'm gonna go check in on Claire. They are still in the C# breakout room.
All right, I think a few people has already left. There was a great discussion on the C# break room as well. There was one of the questions. Yeah, there's one of the question is, but Claire has already explained it, but it will be good to be repeat here because it is a recorded session on this one. You know, the user is each automate that when you trigger the users edit the input files, and then it's save on the branch, or like, you know, it's create a new project. Is there any way to display this after the fact that you run the trigger? Or it is, for example, you give different values, run different checks, let's say, as in the same model, but then you need to compare it later side by side or something. Is there any way to show this output or all the inputs by the user?
Okay, good question. Yes, this was one of our early feedbacks into Automate, is that people want to see the inputs. Yes, it is coming on the automation page itself, where you see what functions you've used for your given automation. You will be able to go in and see what the values are that you supplied to any specific function. And what you'll also be able to do is change those values if you want to update them. So yes, those will be available pending UI updates to our automation page. If your question was around, can we publish that to back to the Speckle server? We haven't considered that. So that's an interesting proposal. Should we publish more criteria around the status page on the Speckle server? If that was your question, we'll take a note of that, because that one has not came up before, and it's interesting.
Is there The other, that was one of the things that we see on the function dashboard struggle today. I'm sure it is on the roadmap. For example, we couldn't find the function that was created by me, like, or the author or a certain person, or maybe kind of, let's say that you're going to tag or label some of the things that you might need to go back to use them, right? Or permissions, like currently all the functions are open to public, whether there's any the roadmap on your plan to make it like permissions on the functions, like the shared permissions with the different people, with domains and other.
All of those to all of those questions, the answer is yes. So I bet you all are familiar with marketplace experience, maybe like app stores or whatever's. So none of the concepts that we've been using in the Automate marketplace should be new. And we tend to fully support something similar of an experience that you can filter by tags, filter by authors, filter, or we also have a notion which I forgot to showcase heavily is featured functions, which we will be able to feature specific functionalities that are considered super good, or in a certain context considered as exceptional. So yeah, all of those are coming. So you should be able to filter for specific functions that only that support Revit, right? That's a very valid request, and it is coming. Also, sharing or permission controls. Yes, this is not a secret, as we said that Automate is a product. So we are going to look into how this turns into an actual product at the end of the day. And permission control is definitely something that will be part of Automate as the final product, right? We know that not every company wants to expose their own internal logic to be publicly available. It is something that will be part of the final Automate experience. For now, we are trying to move quick to get a sense of what is useful to have in Automate as a product, and for that we sort of know we need this critical mass of open collaborators that can influence that behavior, right? But it is definitely on our to-do list, and we know that it's needed for the final launch.
I have one more question as a developer. Is there any way that any staging environment, like maybe publishing the function as a web work in progress, but not everyone is going to see that you will. So what are the tools that in order to debug your code, like is just, hey, it's basically you're making a big mistake here, something
okay.
like is very, very, dummy mistake, but the only way that you right now you understand, you put the console logs. And is there any way to, debug the code without going the full automation or pushing them into
Very
before
good question.
testing? Yeah.
Okay, very good question. I didn't think that 3 hours will be short to not tackle this problem, but we did prepare with a few examples how you can go around this. And as I said in the description of what a function is, it is practically just in terms of a .NET application, it's a .NET console application that you can run locally. So we try to be developer friendly in this, that we do not impose a lot of impossible criteria that you won't be able to run your functions locally, right? I know there are certain CI systems that make this very, very hard to debug stuff locally. We tend to struggle from that too. So what we also worked with is we ensured that if you have a functional logic, if you have a local development environment, you can run it, you can debug it. You need to make sure that you supply the specific values, which can be quite a few number of IDs that you need to supply. We'll have examples for that. So a few of our Speckle by examples have a usual unit testing framework set up that already does this for you. So you can run local unit tests that will execute your function as if it were running in the Automate context. It will require a few project IDs and a token that you can use as your developer to test against your project, but it will be definitely available. So for C# developers, I think we went with NUnit unit testing framework. XUnit is also maybe supported. It's not that big of a difference there. So we try to give a good experience there. As long as you supply the good values, your functions will run, and we'll keep that experience that way for a long time, because we need to develop our functions our own, and we know otherwise it's tricky.